Morning, everybody. I see that people are coming into the meeting now that it's opened. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. If you're just joining, welcome and good morning. We'll be getting started in a few minutes. Good morning, everybody. I see we still have people coming into the call. Happy Thursday morning. As soon as the entrants start to slow down, we'll get started no later than 5 minutes after 9. So again, thank you for being here. I see the new entrants are slowing down. I think what I will do is very gradually get the meeting going with a little bit of an easy start. I appreciate everybody being here today. Thank you so much for your interest in seeing what's happening at JobTrain and getting a view of our long-term vision. I have to tell you, I'm very excited to share this with you today. And it's kind of funny this morning as we lay out for you our deeply, profoundly thought out strategic plan. I'm reminded that plans are, there's a phrase for this, but plans are nothing. It's the planning that's important. But I will say that we did a lot of planning for this meeting this morning, and already things are sort of changing. One of our panelists is going to have a power outage, so he's in on the phone. And I have learned this morning that I can't pull up my notes. So I'm going to be doing this from memory, which is all right, because this is information that I have in my head. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. And again, thank you for joining us today. I'm also very pleased that we have a couple of panelists that are going to join us in the conversation after I've sort of unfolded the strategic plan for you. Two people that know JobTrain very well, that I've had the pleasure of interacting with quite a bit in my time at JobTrain, and in one case with Kris well before my time at JobTrain. So let me introduce our two panelists today, who I'm sure most of you already know. County Supervisor Warren Slocum has been the supervisor for District 4 since 2012, and is currently in his second term as board president. Supervisor Slocum is really focused on equity and systems inequality, and is somebody that I've found on a day-to-day basis to be working very hard for this community. And Supervisor Slocum, I'm really grateful that you're joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Barrie.
Stadelman is good. Yeah, great.
Go ahead,
Stadelman. Thank you, Warren. Kris Stadelman is the director of NOVA, which is the Workforce Development Board for San Mateo County, and I've known Kris for years, even in my prior role. Kris is really known as one of the most innovative Workforce Development Board directors in the state, and that has certainly been my experience of her. She's profoundly knowledgeable about workforce development and the state of the workforce in California, and it's a great pleasure to have you join us this morning, Kris. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks, Barrie.
So let's talk about JobTrain's strategic plan. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through the details of the plan at a very high level, and then we're going to come back and have a conversation with our two panelists. But I want to say a few things about this particular plan before I start walking you through this very high-level view. One thing that I want to say is, boy, what a time to be creating a strategic plan. You know, mid-pandemic, where so much uncertainty. For certain, one of the clarion calls to us in all of our planning is we have to remain very agile, we have to stay connected with the community, and we have to be able to respond flexibly to what is happening around us. So while I'm going to give you this view of this really beautiful plan, we understand that that we have to remain flexible and agile and be ready to pivot if that's what's called for. The other thing that's interesting for me, and I think relevant to you about this plan, is this is the second 3-year plan that has been developed under my time at JobTrain. The first plan was what we created it in my first year at JobTrain. And in a lot of ways, it was a prelude to this plan. It was an opportunity for me to find out what this company JobTrain is really made of and who our stakeholders are, and get a better sense for what the communities that we serve really need. So in many ways, this new 3-year strategic plan is based on my deep understanding of the organization and a continuing to grow profound respect for the men and women who work at JobTrain, for the men and women we serve at JobTrain, and for the many stakeholders that surround us as we try and do our work. So the first 3-year plan was ambitious. This 3-year plan is now based on a great deal of understanding and the input from our community and the input from our staff, as you'll see. So let's take a look at this new plan. So I'm going to share with you some high-level factors that are driving the plan, and then we'll go into, again, at a high level, what it is we're really trying to do. So we'll talk about some of the external factors, the environmental factors that are inputs to this plan. We'll talk about the key drivers that are really influencing what we're focusing on in the next 3 years. Then I'll take a moment to give you a one-page high-level view of what is the next 3 years going to look like for us. And then we'll do some deeper dive at that point into some of the major imperatives, take a quick look at the sort of the summary of that. And in about 20, maybe 25 minutes, we'll come back and we'll have a conversation with our panelists. So let's dive in. You know, you can imagine that for any strategic plan, we have to understand what's going on around us. We have to understand the world we're in and the pressures that are facing the world we're in and our community. Particularly at JobTrain, you know, we recognize that there's this, the harsh reality is that the cost of living in the Bay Area is astronomically high. For a family of 4 to be economically mobile or to have a family sustaining wage in the Bay Area, a family of 4 with 2 working adults must earn $135,000 a year. And we'll compound that challenge by the fact that so many of our low-income residents have lost jobs during the pandemic. So that is a factor we must take into account. But what's also interesting is that through this pandemic, there have been a number of groups that have come together in San Mateo County. It's the San Mateo County Recovery Council. And this is a group, like some other groups in other counties, that are really looking deeply at not just how do we move out of this, but how do we move out of it in a way that's different from past recessions. And so there's this growing understanding that we really do need to do things differently, that a lot of things we've done work in a context, but we need to do things differently so that we don't find ourselves in the same position before. So some of what we're doing in this plan is celebrating the fact that there's a dawning recognition around us that things need to be done differently. And we know, all the reports are telling us today, and this will be true for the long term, that if the Bay Area wants to grow economically, we have to have talent to do that. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we believe, and I know you do too, that our community deserves better. They deserve better jobs, better pay, better opportunities, all leading to a better future. And that's a great deal of what this plan is about. There are some things that are driving us as well, and these drivers, like the external factors, are playing a big role in how we've unfolded this strategic plan. One of the drivers is, of course, the voice of our community and the voice of workers. We spent a great deal of time at the beginning of this plan interviewing stakeholders, holding community listening sessions, and of course, using the data that we've collected from our community surveys to figure out what it is we really need to be focusing on here. So the community voice and workforce plays an extremely important role in this plan. The idea of economic mobility is really our North Star now. It is really the layering on of new programs, which in essence, economic mobility is simply to say that if I have the right wages and benefits if I have that in the right level, then I can go where I want to go. I can live where I want to live. I can have my children in the schools where I want them to be. In other words, I have this level of economic mobility that is allowing me to thrive in the place where I live. And JobTrain has set this North Star around economic mobility being our true goal. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that is a key driver in this plan. We also believe that we need to expand our programs. What we do works, and it works profoundly well, and that compels us to believe we should be doing it in more places, never more important than as we recover from this pandemic. And we are not of the school that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We are of the school that we can always do better. So we have a lot of energy in this plan around the ongoing effort of continuous improvement, evolving our programs, using data to evaluate and improve. So continuous improvement is really impacting all of our programs in some way. And then finally, we know that a strong team of staff is going to mean a strong organization with strong results, and we continue to be very committed to our staff wellness and professional development. So these are the key drivers in this plan, and you'll see them reflected throughout our initiatives. And I do want to say a little bit about this big question, because you're going to see that what we're planning for JobTrain and for this community is very ambitious. It's audacious in many ways. So I feel like I need to answer the question about why JobTrain and why now. First of all, I'll go back to this idea that the impact that JobTrain has delivered, the quality of the outcomes that JobTrain has delivered for many, many years is best in class. And that really incentivizes us to continue to bring these services to more people and to do it in a continually improving way. We, because of who we are, our deep and broad service portfolio, our history of best class outcomes, we've established this economic mobility North Star, which is something that we're uniquely positioned to do, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. But my experience now after 4 years at JobTrain is this organization has a kind of a strength and a kind of breadth and depth that should compel us, should be the foundation of us to do more and more and more in terms of number of clients served, but also the kind of quality programs, especially around economic mobility that we deliver and create. We have very strong partnerships. You can see some of the partnerships on this list, some of the greatest organizations in the community, very strong aligned partnerships that drive us forward. And we have an incredible stakeholder community, and that shows up in almost everything that we do. Having Supervisor Slocum and Kris Stadelman here today is an example of busy people who have a lot of demands on them who are showing up for JobTrain to help us to do, in this case, this moment. So our strong stakeholder community, these things all combined give me the confidence to go forward with some of these very ambitious goals. So speaking of ambitious, this is really at the highest level what you can expect from JobTrain over the next 3 years. First is a series of initiatives and goals around program replication and scale. In the next 3 years, we will triple our capacity for the number of clients served, and we will almost reach that triple level by the 3rd year. We will add 2 new career pathways to our existing 4 career pathways, and we'll add 1 new regional location to our current 6 locations. And that new location will probably span beyond the peninsula into the East Bay or some further out location, just for the record. Then, because of our economic mobility thrust, because nobody else is committing to economic mobility for the community in the way that we are, that there are no best practices for us to fall back on. We're already launching programs around economic mobility that we know are going to have an impact, but we also know that there's a lot that just simply isn't known about what it takes to get from the start of a career in these middle-skill, middle-wage careers, to get from the start to an advanced point in that career where you are earning enough and have the right benefits and all the other things that are connected to economic mobility. So in service of this innovation and the expansion, we're going to open the new Center for Economic Mobility, which will be in East Palo Alto. We expect that facility to open in 2024. In that facility, we're going to triple our space for partner hosting because we have a strong belief that this ambitious and lofty goal of economic mobility is not something we can do on our own. So we're creating space to have more connected hosted partners and systems for more of a partner ecosystem broadly beyond who's working with us in the building. We're going to be launching an innovation lab, and we're going to be expanding the economic mobility programs we've already layered in. So this replication and scale of our programs, combined with the creation of a whole new way to innovate and create new programs, is at the heart of this 3-year plan. But always we have to pay attention to the wellness of our staff and the professional development of our staff so we can attract, so we can maintain, retain high quality talent that we have and bring in new talent. We have to be extremely focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. This is a moment in California, a moment in our nation where there's a dawning awareness, and we're going to seize this moment ourselves by strengthening our own capabilities, but also being willing to work with others and continue to amplify this new awareness and the dawning sort of new programs. And then last, definitely not least, is JobTrain is raising $45 million for our new building and a lot of these expansion and innovation capabilities. I'm happy to tell you we're well on our way on this capital campaign, but it's a big 3 years coming up, and I think in many ways you can see a pivotal 3 years. So if those are the things we're trying to accomplish, how do we see ourselves going about that? And this next 4 slides that I'm going to show you are what we call the imperatives for this strategic plan. And so I'm going to walk through each one. I warn you, there's a lot of information in these slides, and I'm going to try and just kind of bring you context to each one of them. And there will be a document that we'll share with you following this meeting that will give you a little more information, and always you can reach out to me if you'd like to dig in more on these. But let's talk about each of these 4 imperatives around economic mobility, around program replication and growth, continuous improvement, and staff wellness and development. So this is a model for each of the next 4 slides. So let me get you oriented to this view here. So obviously, the what is a bit of a definition about what we mean by this imperative. The how are the high-level initiatives that we're launching in the next 3 years in service of this imperative. The projections over on the right are how many additional clients we'll serve through this set of initiatives and how many staff it will take over the next 3 years to accomplish our goals. So with that in mind, let's take a look at economic mobility. Now, I've talked a little bit about this already, so I think that you understand that economic mobility is essentially the ability for an individual to thrive in the place where they live. And we say thrive economically since that's our part of this equation. And this is trailblazing for JobTrain. It's uncharted territory. So we have to be willing to not only put our sort of our reputations on the line in some way and try some things that we believe are the right things to do, but also to do a lot of research and create new programs. So this is uncharted territory, and we're going to be driving into that and building the capacity in many ways for the kinds of rigor that we need to go through in creating these new programs. The things that we're going to be doing, you can see this list here. We're going to be expanding our career advancement coaching program, which we began a pilot of this year. We have a 2-year pilot underway. It's already growing and already showing interesting results. We're going to expand on our partner engagement and development systems. We're going to be developing, employer partner engagement systems. So this is where we're going to be really rethinking how do we engage with employers in a way that really creates the connection between their open jobs and the community we serve, and making those connections strong and deep and useful. We think that we need a better partner ecosystem. We think we need to get better at measuring what economic mobility looks like and what our end goals are. We are thinking that we have to play a bigger role in policy and systems change, because we know these issues that we're trying to address are bigger than us and bigger than the communities we serve. And we have to prepare for all the new programs we'll be able to turn on in the Center for Economic Mobility. So that's our view of economic mobility. This is an important thrust, and a lot of this is ramping up to our capacity to add these new programs to our portfolio of services. You've heard me talk about replication and growth. It's a simple and straightforward equation. The things that we do are working. And there are communities that don't have some of the things that we do. The last thing we want to do is go into a community that already has things that JobTrain has to offer. We only want to be in a place where there's a lack there. And we've been growing, but the challenge that we've recognized in the growth that we've done is that we need to step back a little bit and develop the systems and the frameworks and the plans for how to grow going forward in a replicable, sustainable way. So a lot of our work around replication and growth is some additional replication and growth in the first year, but really much more in the second and third years. The next year, this year, is really about stabilizing our systems and our processes and our plans so that we can grow with more rapidly, with better fidelity, and for as far as we feel that we need to go. I'm going to go back to that slide. I want to point out to you on the projections part of this slide, this is the total client, this is the total number served, comparing fiscal 21, our last year, to the next 3 years. So you can see a substantial growth, and you can see that most of our staff increases that we're projecting in the summary slide are coming from this area. They're really coming from program replication and growth and economic mobility strategies. We'll see that later. So I have to say that continuous improvement is something that I think oftentimes doesn't get really spotlighted in strategic plans because it's not that exciting. But in reality, we have to understand that the world around us is changing so quickly, and we have to be constantly adjusting our existing programs so that they're relevant and that they are continue to work well. At JobTrain, we've been working down this path for a good number of years, certainly since I've been at JobTrain. And so this is an evolving category. Right now, we're in a place where we're saying, okay, we need to lock down on our quality assurance measures. How do we know the data's there? We know the data's there and we know it's right, but then we don't have good systems to show us that and have this cadence of validation. So we're working on that. We are working on process improvements because there's a constant need for us to evaluate and shift, deepening our ability around the evaluation of our impact and therefore responding. And I think if I've been told this once, I've been told 100 times that JobTrain is the best kept secret around. And we don't think that's appropriate. Mostly because what we do does have value and we want to share it with others. We want to grow our influence and our impact. So this will happen in this initiative as well. And then the last major initiative before I go to sort of a summary and we open it up for a conversation with our panelists is the idea of staff wellness and professional development. The reality is that JobTrain really is just a bunch of human beings that are coming together around this kind of a plan. And if we don't take care of our human beings and make sure that they are well and they are thriving, then how can we expect to do that for the rest of the community? Interestingly, this means that we've had staff say to us, not infrequently, we're so excited about economic mobility for the community. Are you excited about that for us as well? Do you want that for us as well? And of course we do. And we have felt that way, but it's clear that we need to create a much more comprehensive system of really economic mobility for our staff. So we're working on this wellness and economic mobility set of initiatives. Part of that is really the professional development of our staff. So we're working on new training systems and programs and a way to really lift up our team and help them develop and grow within the organization. We're growing as an organization. We need stronger HR systems. And we're finding that as we grow and we have all these different locations, that internal communications are getting more and more complicated. And so we have to have ways to address that. So you can see that this is an organization that is on the go. Take a look at these high-level estimates that come from all of this strategic planning. We are going to significantly, you can see that from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22, we have substantially increased our capacity to serve individuals. And that was very intentional, knowing that this is about the time that pandemic would tend, believing, not knowing, we don't know anything it seems these days, believing that the pandemic would be in recovery in fiscal year 22. We ramped up our systems and services, added staff, and increased our budget. This is our outcome projections, our staff levels, and our budget for this year. But in order to continue to grow and move into this program, we spent the time to understand, if we do these things, how many more people will we serve? How many more staff will we need? And what is that going to cost? So you can see that we're going to be continuing to grow over the next 3 years. We're going to be continuing to add capacity and grow in the number of people that we can serve. And that is going to cost a continuing level of new budget. So I am going to move now to a conversation with our fantastic panelists. And one of the things that has happened in the planning of this meeting is, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't realize that I wouldn't have access to my notes. So we have a couple of questions set up for our two panelists. Kris and Warren, please join me here. And I'm going to try and remember precisely what our first two questions were, but I know that you'll cover for me if I get it a little bit wrong. So I'll start with
Barrie,
Supervisor. Yes.
quickly, you can unshare the presentation as well so we can see.
Oh,
you and
okay,
everyone
great
else.
idea. Thank you, Patty. Great idea. Well, with unsharing, I can get back to my notes as well. How convenient is that? So Kris, let's start with you, since your picture is, since we're actually seeing you, and Warren will go to you next. Kris, tell us a little bit, when you look out to the future, and your point of view from workforce development and community support, what are you focusing on? What do you see as needed? What are you working on?
Well, we're working on some of the same things that you're working on, and I think you're well aligned, as you know, from the work groups that we both work on together for the County of San Mateo. It's economic mobility. When you ask me to look out into the future, that is a dangerous thing to do. For every question I get asked, for 2 years now, I've been saying it's too soon to tell. It is too soon to tell. We also tell everybody our crystal ball is broken. We used to be able to see around the corner, and now we know better. But we are well aligned with the direction you're moving in. And some of the things, in thinking you didn't have your notes, I sort of made up my own questions. And what I wanted to tell you was, I applaud the goal of economic mobility. We share that, we can work on that together. It is the one that's important now. I want to applaud your plans for expansion. At a moment like this, with so much uncertainty, a lot of organizations are hunkering down, just trying to survive, when in fact, this really is the time to go out and make a difference as people recover and as workers come back into the workforce. And the other thing I want to applaud is your focus on staff development. For too long, there's been this mentality that if you work for low-income people, it's okay if you're low income too. No, these are essential workers. They are care workers. All work is worthy of being fairly compensated. And I really appreciate the fact that you're going to focus on that. I wish all CBOs would.
Thank you, Kris. I appreciate that very much. Supervisor Slocum, same question to you. What do you see coming up? What's your view, and what are you working on?
Thank you, Barrie. Let me ramble for a moment, if I could.
Please.
I just wanted to say, first of all, that I've worked with JobTrain for a very long time. Barrie, you've been there for, I think, four or so years, and before you, I worked with the director, and so I have a history with JobTrain, and I just want to say that you and your current team at JobTrain are the best iteration ever of the organization, in my view. I can feel the energy, I can feel the passion, and I'm always talking about the heart and inspiring people through the heart. And I think that's exactly what your strategic plan does. Things that we're working on at the county, and I know you're very aware of this and the work of the Recovery Council, but I think it centers around a couple of areas. One, you mentioned a couple of times, is the high cost of living here on the peninsula, and then also unemployment rates, especially Barrie, in our low-income communities. And for a very long time, the county has been a strong supporter of JobTrain. And while I'm here today sharing some thoughts with you all, I just want you to know, for those in attendance, that our Board of Supervisors and our county organization is truly aligned with the work of JobTrain and truly aligned with this new strategic plan. And we believe there's great promise for the future to address the issues that face us. COVID, I became president of the board when COVID hit, and I can tell you that it was a year that was probably the busiest in my life, being involved in conversations with public health and all the rest of the program areas related to the recovery and COVID. But one of the things that came out of all of this that I think is a national model is, frankly, our Recovery Council and how we've involved many different segments of the community in that work and identifying the things that we should be working on. By way of history, Barrie, you know that we've invested some $218 million. That's $218 million in various relief programs that I think in one way or another are all related to the things that you've talked about. I happen to believe and have been involved for a very long time in the development of affordable housing, for instance. And in that area, we've given some $92 million for just rental assistance and housing support, $92 million. 71 million, Barrie, to food assistance. Over 2 million, nearly 3 million meals have been delivered to folks in need. We gave some $16 million to immigrant families who wouldn't otherwise qualify for benefits. $20 million in emergency relief for our small businesses in the county. 7.3 million in child care and 6.4 in technology and Wi-Fi and giving more people access to the network. And finally, about $4 million to nonprofits to help out those enterprises during this period of COVID. And they've been hard hit, as you know. At the county, we always say we can't do it alone. And so to have a partner in JobTrain is, I think, really a strength of ours. And I'm looking forward to working with you, Barrie, on the plan as we roll it out during the next several years. But I just get back to the point of the high cost of living and the unemployment. These are very potentially destabilizing impacts for our region. And we really have to, I think, be diligent in trying to figure out new ways to get housing built faster. Yesterday evening, I was in a meeting about the missing middle and how we might use bonds to help do construction for the missing middle. But in any case, I think the main thought is that the county can't do it alone, and we rely on organizations, trusted organizations like JobTrain, and hopefully we can all be aligned to this strategic plan, and in some ways the county will be there to help. I think that your focus on diversity and equity and the wellness of the staff and growth are just spot on, because we all know it takes brain power to move a strategic plan from pieces of paper to reality. And I'm always reminded of the fact, if I could just have a few more seconds, I'm always reminded that growing up, I came up in Detroit for a part of my life as a young boy, and I can remember visiting my cousins in a part of downtown Detroit that were basically 3-story, what I would call urban mansions. And it was just a wonderful area with tree-lined streets and very wealthy. And in any case, my cousins lived there, and we would often visit them in this glorious neighborhood. And as an adult, I went back to that neighborhood. Obviously, a long time has passed, and it was basically like a war zone, Barrie. Houses were boarded up, the trees were gone, places were burned out. It really looked like it had abandoned cars on the streets. It looked really like a war zone. And what happened was the collapse of the auto industry. And of course, in Detroit, a lot of people relied on that. And that sort of has stuck with me. And I'm in a race against time to, at least you think that can't happen here. I would offer that it could happen here, given the cost of living, unemployment, and other factors. And we've got to do everything we can to get people into stable housing, because I think that's one of the key components of our recovery and what we need to be doing differently in the future, figuring out ways to get things built faster and how to deal with unemployment and this idea that you've mentioned several times of economic mobility. I couldn't be a stronger supporter of that. So I think that, working together as we have in the past, and sometimes you and I have brainstormed and just chatted about future directions, and I'm looking forward to continuing that relationship. And of course, the work that we do with NOVA is significant. And I just know, at least for us here, NOVA, San Mateo County, and JobTrain, we are truly aligned and I think motivated to address things like tripling of capacity and supporting your long-term vision. So I'm going to stop there. I know I've rambled on and probably exceeded my time, but I just say all of this is very critical for our region. We need to be taking steps to stabilize these things. And I think this strategic plan lays out a path on part of the work that needs to be done in that regard. I'll stop there, Barrie.
Thank you very much. So many points, Supervisor Slocum, that I really would like to be able to drill down on. I do want to say a couple of things. Kris and I are with you on the Recovery Council. So we are tracking what is going on there, and I couldn't be more impressed. I have sat on a couple of recovery tables during this pandemic, and I can say from my perspective, San Mateo County is so far beyond any of the other tables in terms of actually getting work done, putting dollars into the community, focusing in the right places. It's really been incredible to watch. You said earlier that that we need to keep our hearts in this work. This is heart-centered work. And I will say that when I came to JobTrain, one of the things that was my mantra early on was don't screw this place up, right? It's already so fantastic. Don't mess it up. And what was at the center of that was the heart that JobTrain brings to its work. The care for the individuals, the respect for the individuals. And to me, that is the most important thing we can carry forward. So thank you for your comments, Warren. I want to say to the audience, there will be a few minutes for questions and answers. So if you'd like to log questions in the chat, Patty will coordinate that for us. And Kris, I'd like to move back to you and sort of go a little bit off script, but based on what Supervisor Slocum has said, I know that you are working for San Mateo County to develop sort of a go-forward plan around this economic recovery. Would you like to say a few words about that, and maybe within that to serve my needs, to reinforce some of the ways that is aligning with what JobTrain is planning to do as well?
Thank you, Barrie, and thank you, Supervisor Slocum, for your kind words. I want to echo what Barrie said, that the San Mateo Recovery Table is the most effective group that I have participated in throughout this pandemic. People come together without posturing, without hidden agendas, without any goal except to contribute to the recovery of the community. And it's made a huge difference. The investments have been very strategic, and San Mateo's just way ahead of everybody else. As to what we're working on what you alluded to, Barrie, we have a subgroup of the Recovery Council, a community resource group, working on workforce development, looking strategically at all the partners that need to be at the table, all the players, all the potential services, trying to build a network for San Mateo County based on information sharing and the coordination and leveraging of resources. So Barrie's at that table, adult ed, community colleges, organized labor, county representatives, I'll say the usual suspects, all people that, county health, for example, that are focused on work and the health of the community based on economic issues. I will say that I see the biggest threat, not just to the California economy, but to the country's economy, is the economic divide. As I mentioned a few days ago, the labor market does not reward labor any longer. The labor market rewards skills. So it takes organizations like JobTrain, like Nova, to take workers and turn them into skilled workers, to take skilled workers and turn them into talent that employers locally can use so that we can start to bridge that economic divide. Now, of course, we're all dependent on a solution to the housing issues that's driving so much of the cost of living problems that we have. And we're workforce, but we know that if we don't fix the housing issue, the workforce will not thrive. But once you fix that housing issue, we have to have a skilled workforce that is talent, not labor, because robots are going to do that someday, that is talent. Organizations like JobTrain are poised to meet that market niche, that just-in-time training, that need just appeared. We have a great deal of respect for our public institutions, but it takes them a long time sometimes to respond. It does not take JobTrain a long time to respond. They can be there to meet that niche in the marketplace. And we're there as a workforce board to help them. So I think we're well aligned. I'm glad we're partners. And I think that even though we don't know where we're headed, that both of our organizations are nimble enough to be able to respond when we see it.
Yeah, thank you, Kris. I so agree with everything that you've said, and a couple of things that I want to call out that are both in your sort of focus area and in ours. That one is, and you said this in our large group meeting yesterday, that really what needs to be different going forward is centering everything around this idea of equity, and so I think that is something that I know Supervisor Slocum has talked quite a bit about. I know it's at the center of our San Mateo County Recovery Council conversations. It's at the center of JobTrains. I think it's really interesting, and Warren, I would see if I'm going to put you on the spot and see if you have any particular ideas about this. But we're all now in the process of saying, well, the work we've been doing for us, Kris, has been really around equity, but we haven't always positioned it that way. And so there's a way in which we need to tool up our understanding of equity, the way we will measure it, the way we will look for change there. Supervisor Slocum, do you have some thoughts about what you'd like to see in this context of equity, how you think that should look over the next couple of years, or what you're thinking about in that context?
Yeah, thank you, Barrie. Appreciate that. We had the good fortune to, a while back, create a position in the county called Chief Equity Officer. And that person has been on the job for a few months now, and I'm very impressed with the work that's going on. I had the pleasure, the honor of laying out our equity sort of platform and asking the questions of how do we infuse equity into San Mateo County as an organization back when I was president of the board a couple of years ago. And since then, of course, the pandemic and all the things that we've been through have have illustrated health disparities and a lot of other disparities. So I'm really pleased to see that, generally speaking, equity is now at the forefront of a lot of conversations. And I just wanted to share, Barrie, if I could, one sort of insider's secret that I'll share with all the people on the call. One of the things that we're working on right now that's really exciting, and I think aligns with the work that JobTrain is going to be doing during this strategic period, is what we're calling anchor institutions. And basically, an anchor institution is nothing more than a larger organization in our community, like a community college or a hospital, a city, and so forth and so on. And what we're going to be trying to do, this hasn't been made public yet, but it's coming to the Board of Supervisors right after the first of the year, is how do we create this idea of anchor institutions with all of these organizations? So it basically means community colleges and other institutions coming together so that with the county and the cities and the major organizations, that we can leverage our resources so that, for instance, in the area of purchasing, we all purchase computers and computer supplies and so forth and so on. Imagine a world where all of the institutions in San Mateo County have agreed to leverage purchasing resources and pool our money and create change. So what has happened historically in government, and somebody said that sometimes government responds slowly, I think the pandemic obviously showed San Mateo County that we need to be, as you were saying, more agile, more flexible, more nimble. And I think we're on that path. And I believe this anchor institution idea is really exciting and has the potential to align various institutions in the community for purchasing power and a lot of other things. And you'll be reading about this in the near future. But if you just want to Google, for the audience, if you want to just Google anchor institutions, if you're not familiar with it, you'll find a lot of information on it. And Supervisor Groom and I are bringing forward some legislation in early January. I think it's going to be to create this whole path for the county and the institutions that are within our borders. So it's pretty exciting. I know I haven't explained it very well. I'm trying to talk fast and not consume all the time, but just trust me that it's a very powerful sort of idea, and I think it aligns with a lot of what you've been talking about, Barrie. I'm going to stop there and put a period after that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to hear more about that, but I'll tell you that I think this concept of an anchor institution model, where there are certain organizations, certain institutions that can really sort of carry elements of the administration and the coordination, but that pulls in other smaller organizations that really have value and purpose and can bring a lot to the equation. I think, Kris, this is a little bit of the direction we seem to be heading in your movement as well. Is it's not just about the big organizations, it's finding a way to bring all of the relevant organizations into the work and develop an ecosystem around that. Patty, I want to check with you to see if there are some audience questions that you'd like us to get to.
Yes.
We have just a few minutes, but I think we'd love to take a couple questions.
Yeah, thank you. There are a couple questions that have come up recurring, and they're directed to you, Barrie, and JobTrain. What are the new pathways? What are the new types of skills training that we're looking into for the future, and when might those be rolled out?
Yeah, thankfully, Kris really answered this question for me earlier, which is a lot of, we're not sure. I will say this, because we know that more than ever before in my time in workforce development, the future of work really is in a shift. because of the remote work capabilities, because of the way that frontline workers are sort of fleeing the workplace, and also in some regards fleeing the region because they don't see the equation of jobs that pay enough and ability to live here. There's a lot going on in workforce development right now. And what JobTrain has really done, and is nearly at the point where it's all ready to go, is we've developed the capability internally to evaluate labor trends and evaluate on a micro and macro level what's happening in the labor market. We think that the future of workforce development for JobTrain is a combination of the tried and true career pathways, healthcare, technology, construction trades. Those are tried and true pathways. They're going to be strong going forward. But then this sort of second level of career training, which is really more stand up a career training program because there's a lot of demand, take it back down as that demand shifts. So much more nimble, much more responsive to the needs of the employers for the right kinds of jobs. So I think we don't have a clear picture of which our next pathway will be, which next fiscal year is where we plan to deliver our first new pathway. We've got some time to figure that out. And if I told you what it was now, you should shame me because we can't possibly really know what's going to happen there.
Great. Thank you, Barrie. One more question from our friends in our cities that we serve is, what role can cities that JobTrain serves play in supporting this ambitious but sorely needed strategic plan?
You know, I mean, there are so many ways. I mean, I really appreciated what Supervisor Slocum said about finding a way to sort of bring government and the power of government, for instance, purchasing, to sort of level the playing field in some ways around the expenses of nonprofits. If I had one wish of local city government, city, county, state government, it's that they knew what we were doing. You know, I realize that seems like a very light ask, but the fact of the matter is elected officials are very busy. They have a lot of different things on their plates. They have a lot of demands on them. I think that the kind of thing that JobTrain is doing, I think when NOVA gets their sort of plans in place, there will be a larger platform for this. But it's really just take an interest, see what we're doing, see how it aligns. And then you're going to have moments as city officials where you can say, I happen to know that we have an organization in our community that's doing that. Let's go look more at that. Let's see if we can get them some support. So it starts with an awareness of the challenges the community is facing and the ways we can get at those challenges, and then working together to amplify them and lift them up when the time is right.
Excellent. Kris, question for you. Can you talk a little bit about NOVA and what NOVA does? What's NOVA's role sort of and charter?
So I love that question. NOVA is the federally chartered workforce development board for the region, and we cover 7 cities in Santa Clara County and all of San Mateo County. We're an 8 jurisdiction joint powers agreement housed in the city of Sunnyvale. It's called a workforce development board because we have a board, and that board is a majority private sector, and then the public sector seats are all the usual suspects: education, organized labor, community-based organization, groups that have a stake in workforce development. Our goal is to pay attention to what's happening in the labor market and to sort of smooth the pathway of workers into employment. We need to be able to assess workers as to what skills do they have, how are they relevant in the local economy, and what preparation do they need to fit into what employers are looking for. So we talk to a lot of employers, we pay a lot of attention to employers. We run a couple of job centers. Our youth provider is JobTrain, and we work with them as a partner on many other programs. And we work with a lot of other both government and community-based organizations to kind of coordinate the work and the focus around workers and making the labor market function better on behalf of workers for the most part.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kris. Barrie, I think we're getting to the end now, so I'm going to give you time to wrap up.
Great, thank you, Patty. So by way of sort of wrap up, I would say that I hope what you're seeing here is that there is, in fact, quite a bit of a common vision that is happening in San Mateo County right now. Nova is helping us to form that vision. The county supervisors are putting the wind under the wings of these visions and driving them to make sure that the community is being served. But there are some themes. Recovery from the pandemic, from a jobs and an economic standpoint, very much a thing that JobTrain is working on, that everybody knows needs to happen. We can't do it alone. There are themes around being more of a collective action movement here, working with other appropriate partners and creating synergy around that idea of working together, not only in service of sort of how the systems work, but to make it easier for a low-income individual to navigate this complicated set of organizations and systems, and a desire and a focus on finally getting at this question of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and adjusting the systems that for so long have undermined and disconnected communities of color from the mainstream benefits of the economy and the other things around us. We have common themes. We have a common vision, which is something that I've only dreamt about in my career that is actually happening here. And with that, we're going to learn to work better together, and we're going to deliver on these. And I see JobTrain as just one of the organizations that has to be a part of this, but in my opinion, one that's going to be delivering a lot of good. And actually, if we do our jobs right in this next ambitious 3 years, we're going to be shifting to some extent the direction of workforce development in our county in the way that we do it. So, Kris, Stadelman, Supervisor Slocum, thank you both so much for being here today. It's always a pleasure, and I feel like we could talk about this forever and be in such close sort of intellectual connection around this, because we see things the right way, in my opinion, in the same way. So thank you both so much for being here today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks, Barrie.
And to everybody else, thank you for being here. Know that we are going to be sending out to everybody who attended this meeting a sort of a little bit of a more detailed overview of our strategic plan. But now we get into the business of delivering on this plan and reporting on results. So here we go. Again, thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for joining JobTrain.